Spotlight, a production of the Libertarian Party Affiliate Support Committee, Valerie Sarwalk, Chair, and of course, the Libertarian National Committee, Joe Bishop Henchman, Chair. As always, we've got John Gabso on the big board. I'm your host, Pat Ford, Chair of the Libertarian Party, Rhode Island, and a very special guest tonight, appearing with us for the very first time in just our second show, Paul Robbins Jr. He's a communications chair of the Alaska Libertarian Party. The reasons for this show, as opposed to, say, the Candidate's Corner, are really to produce a spotlight, as we say, on the activities, the skills, the talents, the programs, the energies of your libertarian affiliates, whether they be a county affiliate, perhaps a regional affiliate, a statewide affiliate. We want to talk about best practices and everything from get out the vote, membership retention, discussions about dues and fees, advertising, editorial policies, communications policies, and the type of events that can strengthen not only our affiliates politically, but also serve to deliver the libertarian philosophy at a local level that we have not seen before. I want to take a quick thank you to Evan McMahon. He joined us last week as the development director of the Indiana Libertarian Party, and we talked extensively about their successful affiliate generation. Tonight, we're going to take an entirely different focus in terms of affiliates. But first, let me welcome Paul Robbins to our show. He's the communications chair of the Alaska Libertarian Party, and he's got an entire career out of communication skills, out of message development, and the occasional, I would imagine, based on what I know of his background, the sort of bailout, the rescue, the that crisis management capability that will probably stead him very well as he rises to a national level to the Libertarian Party. Paul, thank you for joining us tonight, and welcome to the Libertarian Affiliate Spotlight.
Thank you, Pat. And you're absolutely right. The public affairs community is a break glass in case of emergency for most organizations, and I have been doing that for 20 years now and enjoying it. I'm glad to apply it now to the Alaska Libertarian Party.
Actually, and let's talk about your background, because it's fascinating. You do communications. You talk to people. You message. All the things that are talked about so obliquely throughout the party nationally, but you've done it in some really fascinating spots at locations, and you've done a great deal of academic work to support it as well. So give us your background.
Well, I kind of stumbled into the field when I joined the Marines at 19 and chose public affairs, and turned out to be something not only that I enjoyed just as an outgoing person who liked to talk to people, but sort of had a knack for. So I did that for about 12 years until I got out, and then I joined another federal agency, and now I do public relations for them. And during that time, I used my GI Bill to go out and get my master's degree in strategic public relations from George Washington University, and been learning ever since. Public affairs and communications is a field where you always have to stay learning and stay a student if you want to keep up with it.
No, that's outstanding. And we are blessed to have you. A lot of us have to learn it on the fly. Crisis management is a talent that you can be trained, but there's a level of intuition that I found with the best communication directors that is truly a gift. Can you now, as a United States Marine, you'll forgive me, but I never thought of the term communications with Marines. I always thought you were told to do something, and it was the communications were pretty direct and pretty blunt. But can you give us a couple examples of where you served and maybe how that lends itself to the kind of chaos that we see in our beloved Libertarian Party from time to time, I'll say?
Well, it shouldn't be as surprising, actually, how skilled the Marine Corps is in brand marketing and communications, considering if you think, can you think of a more popular or established brand in the United States? The Marine in his dress blues, the few, the proud, the Marines, a tagline that's survived nearly 100 years now. They do a fantastic job of it. They've been with J. Walter Thompson, which is their ad agency, since just after World War II, and they do a fantastic job. What I did for them was less. I did marketing for a little bit for them, but primarily it was just communications about our operations. So I'd either work for the base newspaper when I was a younger Marine, writing stories, editing stories, putting together the newspaper design, or when I was deployed to Fallujah and Ramadi, the couple of times I did deploy over there, my job would be to go out and do patrols and operations alongside the infantry units. And when we got back, I would publish a story and photos about what we were doing, much of which would be suppressed because it'd be about combat operations. And we were trying to pretend that we weren't fighting and that we were actually, doing nation building, but still produced them as much as I could, and other stories about delivering food and such. And then later in my career, the focus was more on media relations, answering all the media calls about our operations and conducting interviews, preparing others how to do interviews, which is probably one of the most important parts of my job and my skill set in helping the LP, is preparing people to do interviews with the media. And it's one of the classes I'll be giving at one of the upcoming training that we're talking about.
Right, and we will be focusing extensively on the Alaskan Gold Rush tonight to give folks around the country an opportunity to understand what's going to be going on there. And it is a hell of a lineup. It is literally a slugger's row, if you will, a murderer's row of libertarian talents that's going to be up there that night. I'm fascinated by the brand conversation because the libertarian movement is constantly under siege, if you will, from a marketing perspective. There are a lot of folks who would like to co-opt our movement. There's a lot of folks who would like to define for us our movement, and it's an area of great challenge. And to your point, the few, the proud, the Marine, you're right. That is, when you think of the Army, how many times they've changed, I don't even know if they're doing all that you could be anymore. But, how do you, from your perspective, Alaska, for most of us, is this land of mystery. There is a sizable portion of the American population who will never make it to Alaska in their lifetime. Sadly, I have yet to make it up there. A few friends of mine made it up for a few Grateful Dead concerts a long time ago, but that's another story. We'll talk about that offline. But at the same token, when you think of the libertarian movement and the philosophy, rugged independence, self-determination, that screams Alaska. What are some thoughts on how you tie that in and present that sort of bold image of strength, a personal independence, to an Alaskan?
Yeah, we definitely see ourselves as one of the most libertarian friendly states in the nation. And we, at one point we had a candidate that nearly beat Lisa Murkowski running for state senator. We've had state representatives before elected to Alaska, and we have a number of local elected now. It is from the mindset for Alaskan principles, Alaskan values do align with libertarianism on many accounts, with the rugged individualism, with personal responsibility, with leave me alone and I'll leave you alone. That's kind of why people move to Alaska, is to be left alone. But it is a difficult and uphill process marketing the Libertarian Party up here, and I am working and developing that. And I think that's one of the things the Libertarian Party struggled with as well. We have a great set of principles that we've stuck to since the beginning of our organization. We really haven't established a strong brand across the nation. I mean, if you look at our state affiliates, you look at the AKLP, you look at the Alaska LP, we've got different branding than other states. We all look different as we go, and our messaging tends to be different state by state, which is fine because that's kind of how we're made up. State by state, more power to the states and the federal government, but don't really have a full strategy for Alaska yet. Right now, we're focusing on recruitment. We're focusing on building. Unfortunately, our party had some internal turmoil. We've never heard of that in the Libertarian Party, right?
No.
But we've had some
Shocked.
internal turmoil, some significant changeover in the leadership in the past couple of years, and we've been in kind of a rebuilding phase. But with the passing of ballot measure 2 up here in Alaska, where we now have open primaries and ranked choice voting, there's a serious opportunity for us to get some elected libertarians and get our principles and our message out there in the upcoming 2022 election.
Excellent. No, and you're right on this. One of the things we're going to explore over the next several months, because the goal of this show is to literally, in the next, 51, 52, 53, 54 weeks because we're going to incorporate some of our friends overseas into this effort. But to literally look at each state's perspective, their vision, the prism that they see their libertarian issues through, and attempt to analyze at each level. Every week, I'll just point out, in the case of Rhode Island, which is an astonishingly blue state, one of the two bluest in the nation, we found a lot of traction early on in our affiliate development with fighting corporate welfare, because so often our liberal and progressive friends, our special friends on the left of center of the aisle, would try to brand us as Koch brother loving corporate cronies, yet we are the only organization in the state that actively fights corporate welfare. And when I say fight, I mean we've done picket lines, which are a lot of fun, by the way. It's old school, but you get to take turns handling the bullhorn, and you get to do the no peas, no whatever. But it's a hell of a lot of fun. We testify, we get into people's grill about corporate welfare, and we fight it. And no one in our state at this point could, with a serious face, call us corporatists or corporate welfare types or Koch brother types, because we haven't seen that money either, right? But so each state's got its own challenges. Now, the first and most obvious, and folks, if you're just joining us right now, Paul Robbins, he's the communications chair of the Alaska Libertarian Party, is on, well, not the inaugural, but the second episode, E2, as they would say, S1 E2 on HBO, right, of the Libertarian Affiliate Spotlight. The first issue that just comes to mind is just the sheer size of the state and the sheer diversity of, well, everything. What is the state of the Alaskan Libertarian Party, and where do you have people now, and how do you bring that all together? I mean, you guys are a continent nearly.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult to get together in any large group here, because, for example, I live down in Ketchikan, which is a part of Alaska I didn't know existed till I moved here. I'm the southernmost island of the Panhandle, and it's a beautiful rainforest that has weather similar to Seattle. And everybody thinks Alaska is just a frozen tundra, but there's an entire section of over 17 million acres of rainforest in the Panhandle that has just gorgeous mild weather all the time, except for a ton of rain. And then you travel up from the Panhandle, and that's just a tiny part of Alaska, and get into the mainland. I have to fly for over 8 hours to get to the city of Anchorage from where I am. Wow. You can fit 3 states of Texas inside of Alaska. Texas is our sweet little sister. It's just a tiny state by comparison. They hate hearing that, though. Yeah, it's absolutely massive, and it's difficult, and it's not all that populated. So we have, I think, 800,000 people total in the state of Alaska.
Wow. And again, by comparison, Rhode Island, where I live, is the opposite extreme. We are 44 miles tall, and we have about 1 million people. So we are in one of the most densely populated pockets of the nation, and we are a failed blue nation state here, and you folks have this enormous area to cover. So in terms of major cities politically, I think of Juneau and Anchorage and Ketchikan, and those are the cities that I tend to think of. It's a crazy question, right? This shows the sort of naivete a lot of us. What do you call us, by the way? Mainlanders? Do you have some sarcastic term you refer to the rest of us?
You guys are all the lower 48.
The lower 48. Okay. And that, I'm sure that there's meaning built into that. So down here in the lower 48, we have, again, we're completely naive to how it works politically. I mean, is the legislature the seat of power? Is it stationary? Is it in one part of the state? And how do folks govern?
The legislature is in Juneau. Surprisingly, it's entirely dysfunctional. But it exists in Juneau. There's always a push. There has been a push historically, and every year it's brought back up that they want to move it up to Anchorage, where almost half of our population lives, on the road system, as they call it, not down here in our collection of islands. But those of us here in Southeast want it to stay down in the islands because we feel like they tend to ignore Southeast Alaska in their legislative work anyway, because it's so sparsely populated. I mean, Juneau, which is the capital, You're talking 25,000 people. Our capital city has 25,000 people in it.
Wow.
And Anchorage is close to 300,000, I think it is. And then you got Fairbanks up there, which is rather large, even bigger than Juneau. So those are the big ones. Ketchikan, where I live, it's 10,000 people. So everything's rather rural in Alaska. And Anchorage, I like to joke, doesn't count. Anchorage is about 10 miles away from Alaska, they say.
Wow. So ultimately, most politics are issues driven. The old canard about all politics are local has an interesting ring to it. Where is, for example, in like most states we talk about, obviously you've got pre-COVID, COVID, and now we're starting to, at some level, emerge, or we're being allowed to merge into post-COVID. What are the pressing issues for Alaskans right now? I would imagine, first of all, the environment and oil production continues to be an important economic issue for purposes of the state and the income that's disseminated from that. But what else is going on that folks are obsessing over?
Well, the biggest thing people are obsessing over with COVID is, first of all, Alaska did a great job in not mandating any kind of closures, and especially for local schools here. I'm on the Ketchikan School Board. I was elected this past year, and we kept our schools open from day one. We were briefly closed when the pandemic first started, but when the new school year started, it was full attendance from day one. And we had the safety measures in place to do that. A lot of different places in Alaska, except for Anchorage, and I think Juneau did that. And for the most part, our governor and our legislature just provided information and said, please do this, but they weren't mandates. So didn't kill business as much as other states. What did kill business, however, especially here in Southeast, is much of our economy is dependent on the cruise ships. And because the Democrats and Republicans put in these ridiculous protectionist Jones Act and passenger acts, I can't remember the passenger act's full name, but basically they have to stop in Canada in order to come here. They can't go from one U.S. port to another U.S. port unless they're a registered U.S. ship. And almost all cruise ships are registered overseas I believe, to avoid our taxes. So when Canada closed its borders, these protectionist policies killed our economy. We're not going to have any cruise ships coming for this summer. We're going to have to rely on individual tourism, and that's going to take away a lot of the revenue that's generated, especially Southeast here, in these communities. So that problem is probably one of the biggest things, and Don Young has already introduced some legislation to address that and temporarily fix it, like a waiver for cruise ships, but that's not going to come in time. And they're not addressing the root problem, which is getting rid of the acts themselves.
And, ultimately, the tourism economy in Alaska is a little bit different, because when you talk about cruises and vacations, they tend to be far less of the carnival. You obviously have some of the glacier tours, but a lot of the tourism is ecotourism. A lot of the tourism is very high-end sporting tourism. It's not the type of stuff that you can just drop on a dime and reopen overnight. And this is where you've got, in so many states, a fatal misunderstanding of business cycles and how they work. In Rhode Island, for example, the tourism economy and the offshoots of the tourism economy, weddings, for example, in Newport, we're an international destination. But there's a year to a year and a half curve to book those type of events. And so, again, the business community having to work on its own and literally survive by its own wits, because government is so fundamentally ignorant of what it takes for the individual to coalesce into a business and to actually make a profit. It's, it sounds so cliche for libertarians, but what we're seeing is on so many different levels, what I call proof of concept with the libertarian philosophy. Unlike, say, the early arguments that, well, libertarians, they're going to wither and die because we need the collective to engage together to work through this crisis. When in fact, what we really needed all along was that individual spirit, that fighting spirit, that entrepreneurism, that disruption, all the components of an active economy, an active organic economy that the libertarian philosophy promotes. How many affiliates do you have now, and how many members roughly throughout Alaska do you have? Just a ballpark.
Last we saw, as far as I don't have the membership numbers, but I know we had around 7,000 registered libertarians in Alaska. Need to pump those numbers up as far as ballot access here in the future, and hopefully ballot measure 2 will help with that, as well as this training. Just having a good showing over the next year or two is really going to be our best recruiting method, rather than actively recruiting. Just getting some solid candidates and having them on the ballot in the next couple of years, I think is our best way forward, and that's what we're focused on.
As a media person, when you're that diverse and that spread out, roughly how many media markets are there of prominence in a state like Alaska?
Not many, especially when you talk about TV. The majority of outlets we deal with here are radio, because of how spread out places are, and because these rural communities actually listen to radio quite a bit more than I think most people do. And so TV, you're talking Juneau, Anchorage, Fairbanks, maybe. That's about it. And newspapers are still rather prevalent in Alaska. So we've got a ton of newspapers we still work with, because they still have prominence, because again, up here, because they're so spread out, those things can still survive. Local newspapers are still popular.
And how have they responded over time? We had a presidential election. Were they forthcoming? Did they support the Joe Jorgensen effort? Did you get much bandwidth out of them?
We got some success, especially in papers and a little bit in local radio, but no, we got the same blackout that most people did. We were able to get some front pages on the Juneau Empire, Catch Can Daily News, and things like that. But that was primarily because I have pre-established relationships with all these people through my job. I work with them all the time, so I was able to get some tread in there, get some traction. So I wasn't as easy to ignore, because they have to work with me more often. So I think that had a lot to do with why we had a good gathering there, and we had a really good response up in the Wasilla area, in the Matsu Valley.
Well, I've got to ask you about Wasilla because of her. For many people, until Ms. Markowski has become a little bit more active in the last couple of years, the very face of Alaskan politics was the former vice presidential candidate. Does she, just from sheer trivia, and you notice a lot of the questions that I'm getting fed, by the way, are folks who are just really curious about, everything about your organization and everything that you're dealing with. But that former vice presidential candidate, does she have much political clout left anymore?
I don't think so. I've seen some social media stunts and some statements, and the coverage up here of her has been rather minor. And the different things she's tried to say, like she even mentioned that, or hinted that she might run against Murkowski. I've seen a couple of mentions here and there in the news media, but for the most part, not really. I haven't heard much since I moved up here about 4 years ago. I haven't heard a lot about Palin, unless it was jokes from people talking about Alaska.
There you go. Now, Murkowski is obviously larger than life, at least from the perspective of the lower 48, because she's played such a provocative role in domestic politics and pure politics in the last few years. She's positioned herself as something of an outsider. How well does her act play in Florida? I mean, Alaska, I'm sorry.
That's about polar opposite states right there. So Murkowski is an interesting character, because she is kind of a pariah for the Alaska Republican Party right now, because of her vote to impeach former President Trump and some of her votes recently. And they're looking hard to find somebody to run against her. In fact, they just passed a vote of censure, the Alaska Republican Party did, against Murkowski, and vowed, or whatever the official statement is from the party, that they will find someone to run against her in 2022. So that's a really interesting thing happening here in Alaska politics, is Murkowski, who has been untouchable, who originally won on a write-in campaign, won her re-election on a write-in campaign years back. She's been untouchable for the longest time, but now what's going to happen now that the Republican Party in Alaska says they don't want any part of her, and they're finding someone to run against her?
Wonderful. So let's talk. You got an event coming up, and what it strikes me is, just in our brief conversations we've had, that this is sort of the beginning of a very aggressive direction being taken by the Alaskan Libertarian Party. And you folks are calling it the Gold Rush. And give us the underlying concept and just why it's so important to your organization.
Well, the Gold Rush was our idea. We're not doing a convention this year. We do our convention every 2 years because it's so expensive to get everybody together, because we've talked about the logistics of Alaska. So, but once ballot measure 2 passed, once the people's measure passed, because that was not put through the legislature, the people had to force it through. And we had ranked choice voting for the general and open top 4 primaries. We saw an opportunity, and we got together as a board and as a group and said, we really need to make sure that we're putting forward great candidates in the next couple of years, because this is our chance, right? We've been waiting for this, a change in the election system. We're not fighting for ballot access anymore. We're just campaigning. So what do we need to do? And what we decided was we need a training event, a training and recruiting event, one where we can find candidates, and from start to finish, here's everything you need to know to be a candidate or to work for a candidate. That's what we need. So that's what we did. We put together the Gold Rush, and we started reaching out to people that we knew had the expertise, who had worked in so many different campaigns, who had the knowledge that we needed, whether from the LNC or from other state affiliates. And we put together an 8-hour training, 8 one-hour sessions from 8 great people, well, 7 great people and me, that are going to prepare anyone who attends to be a candidate and to be a successful one at that. And we're very excited that it's headlined by the Spike Cohen.
Right. And let's go down the list and talk about each contribution. Chrissy Wishers is going to be there. And of course, we all know Chrissy. She's the communications director for the Libertarian Party of Ohio. What's her focus going to be?
I think I love her spot the most. Everybody's going to be great, but I love that Chrissy has gotten into the before you even sign up to be a candidate, what do you do to prepare yourself? What is the preparation of a candidate? And that's what she's going to get into, and she has a presentation for us. When you just have the thought and you're like, all right, I want to run for office, what are the next steps before you actually start campaigning? And that's what Chrissy's going to cover, in something that she's done quite a few times. Now,
is it pronounced Sean Stevens? Fill me in on that. Cian. Wow. Sorry, Cian. Yeah. I know you might be listening. I apologize. So Cian is your treasurer. Give us a snapshot, by the way. One of the fascinating issues is the state-by-state perversion, if you will, of ballot access laws, election reporting laws. Just, and I always give little anecdotes about Rhode Island just to juxtapose your situation and ours. In Rhode Island, for example, even if you're an out-of-state political organization, you have to register as a political action committee with the state of Rhode Island and have a local account, if you will, or a national bank that has a local presence in order to donate money to our party. So what are some of the quirks that Cian is going to talk about in terms of what you call APOC reporting requirements?
I think ours are a lot more straightforward. That sounds absolutely crazy, but it is. Our reporting requirements are rather simple. They're just they have certain deadlines you have to meet. You have to have names, emails, phone numbers, addresses, and what was the other thing? Yeah, addresses, phone numbers, and profession. Yeah, occupation of your donors. When they send you in money, you can get that all via website like we do. But it's primarily timing. That's the thing she wants to go over, because there are massive fees and penalties if you do not make your APOC reporting requirements on time. And that's why we really wanted to have this class. And the state of Alaska sent us a bunch of booklets for people who are going to be there, massive booklets that will take some time to read about the reporting requirements. But really important part, and another important part about this one is, this is the one where all the other state affiliates can jump in and make this training their own. Because if you just take out this 9 o'clock slot and have your own 1-hour training there on your state reporting requirements, then now you have a one-stop shop, start to finish training for all of your candidates, because every other aspect of this is not Alaska specific. It's just specific to campaigning. Right. So all you have to do is do that.
No, and that's what I mean. You've got some great libertarians here. 10 o'clock, Tara DeSisto. Of course, Tara is the director of development for the National Libertarian Party. I've had, because she's a Boston gal, I've had the opportunity to meet her on a number of occasions, not the least of which was Rhode Island is the last state in the country to submit its presidential ballot access. And Tara spent a good part of an afternoon with me riding around the scenic hills of Rhode Island, making deadlines to get in thousands of petitions. But she's a wonderful development director. Has she given you, fundraising generically is obviously the application. Has she given you any insight into what specifics she's going to be tackling?
No, I haven't gotten into specifics with Tara yet, but this is one that I'm definitely going to be paying a lot of attention to, is the fundraising aspect, because it's so important to every campaign, right? You've got to have the money to make it. And these are strategies that they don't teach necessarily in public relations. So I'm really interested to see what Tara has to say. And as the fundraising director for the National Libertarian Party, I know she's going to have some great tricks for us.
Now, the next guy up is some guy named Paul Robbins Jr. So, Paul, media interview techniques. Give us one as a tease. Give us a tip here for those who have to spend time with the Fourth Estate.
Well, my favorite one is talk to the person, not the camera. There's too many people that think they need to turn and face the camera lens. You're not the president. You don't get your own state address. It's not what's happening. It's not a podcast. You're having a conversation with another person, and it happens to be recorded, whether it's TV or radio. And another one people don't always believe me on, but the study supported is, if you're doing a radio show, as long as you're not talking about something that you shouldn't be smiling about, but smile, because it actually changes how people receive what you're saying via radio. It actually changes your voice if you smile while you talk, and it is more positively received.
No, absolutely. A lot of the great telemarketing centers will have a mirror, literally, for the sales operations, maybe not for collections, but for the sales operations. They'll have a mirror right in front of the computer or right next to the computer. And as you're talking, you're looking at the mirror and you're constantly aware of your physical bearing. And you're absolutely right that has an incredible impact on just the type of conversation that you have with folks. It creates a halo effect that people feel on the other side of the phone. Mm-hmm. How important, by the way, and just kind of throw one or two wild cards here. How important is it for libertarians not to complain about media bias?
Especially to the media.
Right.
Yeah, you don't want to do it while the media is interviewing you, because that's a little ridiculous. Obviously, that particular media is not showing media bias, but I think it's okay for us to point it out if you're talking about their lack of coverage of our candidates. But I don't think there's any use for us, any positivity that's going to come out of us complaining that media is too far left or this media is too far right. I don't think there's anything productive in that conversation.
Right.
But we can talk about how it's important that the media cover all of the choices that people have in any given election and cover them fairly.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, they're tired of hearing it, quite frankly. And you mentioned the R word. You need to develop a relationship with your local media. It's a give and take relationship. From my perspective, as someone who spends a lot of time on the radio, you need to provide value to their conversation. It's, it truly is a two-way relationship. You're looking for airtime in exchange for being interesting, on point, having salient points, being a little bit provocative without being a jerk. It's a very, very fine line that some of us who've been doing it a long time can accidentally trip over from time to time, just out of frustration.
Relationship is huge.
Right.
I'm not able to do it as much here, but I would tell people I've had a lot of success in the past with going in to news stations, whether it's TV or radio, and introducing yourself, if you can, to the general manager, to the editor, whoever it is, just so there's a face with the name, and that you have just a tiny bit more consideration when your email pops up or your press release comes in. Like I said, I can't do it so much here in Alaska, but building those relationships will lead to your press releases getting seen more, getting read more, and your information being included more in whatever you're trying to do.
Absolutely. I found with the Joe campaign, I did some of the media for New England, and there were a bunch of people I called, and I said, you may not have time for us. It may not be in the news cycle right now, but I wanted to introduce myself. And, if you should have questions, there's going to be a point in time where our candidates are going to be in your area. We'd like you to think about that. So if you can make one of your reporters available, we'll certainly focus on your needs and your schedule to whatever degree possible. But I just wanted to introduce myself. And if questions or issues come up, here's my cell phone number. Call me anytime. I'll answer any question you got. We don't, unlike those other guys, and there's a chance to take a little pot shot at the duopoly, right? Unlike those other guys, you ask me a question, I'm going to answer it. It may not always excite me to answer it, but I'm going to answer it. And I think you have to build up that type of reputation for just being a straight shooter and not doing the dance when it's inconvenient. I think that's so refreshing to people on the media and politics that they can deal when things are bad. That's when you really need the relationship in place. When things are ugly, something goes wrong, a candidate drops out, someone bumbles an issue. If you've got the relationship in place, you get an opportunity to do damage control.
Right.
If it's an adversarial relationship, and this sounds so easy, right? But it's so hardly employed in politics. If you're constantly adversarial with them, well, there's not that relationship to fall back on. No, that's outstanding. Now, of course, you talk about superstars. Caitlin Cloven is going to be talking about social media strategies. I know she's been doing some weekly quick sessions with folks, giving them tips and stuff like that. How important, as a communications person, how important is it to understand not the conventional myths about social media, but and not the bleep posting that we all love to do from time to time, but how important is it to understand the underlying organic statistics of things like search engine optimization and getting your post actually seen?
Those are huge. Just understanding the small tricks of the trade, where if you include a link in your original post, it's going to be spread less by Facebook's algorithm. Or the tricks I like to talk about, especially when you're managing a page, is a lot of times you don't want to respond to comments, especially when you're getting a ton of them on your page. You want to let the community respond, especially if you have a good community already built in, and let them do the responding for you, instead of you jumping in, getting caught up in verbal battles with what are oftentimes trolls. And I'm really looking forward to what Caitlin has to say, from the great job she did with Joe Jorgensen's side originally before we switched over to Spike's side, and now the great job she continues to do with Spike's pages. I think she's gonna help all of our future Alaska candidates here be prepared to run an important social media campaign. But you have to, because so many people nowadays get their news from Facebook and Twitter.
Right. Now, see Michael Pickens, of course, he's, I guess by your definition, he's something of a local guy, right? Washington State. Is that not far? Rhode Island far, Washington State not far. What will Michael be talking about? Now I'm seeing and by the way, AlaskaLP.org/goldrush is a link that we included in our run up to tonight's presentation. We'll share that on screen, and that'll be everywhere. So folks need to remember that link, AlaskaLP.org/goldrush. You have a beautiful site, by the way. And, it's for folks who may not have thought to take time to look at what's going on in Alaska. I think it's a great site to follow because, I just see the interrelationships between the economy, politics, business. This is going to be, I think, a place of great opportunity for the libertarian movement. And it's great to see folks lining up in the Alaska LP ready to take advantage of that opportunity. But what is Michael going to be focused on? It's called The Mindset of a Successful Candidate. Any tips on that?
And hasn't given me any tips on that. And I've seen a few of his classes at that Libertarian Leadership Academy, and I've shared a few as kind of a preliminary run up to our Gold Rush event for people to check out. And I'm looking forward to what he has to say, because I imagine there are quite a few tricks to just having the correct mindset, because as a candidate, you're under a constant barrage of criticism, of interviews, it's just an extremely stressful venture. Whether you're running locally or whether you're running statewide, candidacy is a stressful and impactful venture, and having a very positive and very stable mindset is important. And I'm interested in his insight about that.
Now, of course, Apollo Puzel. Now, we all know him with the Frontier Movement. Mm-hmm. He's brought the Libertarian Party professional campaign staff, while they might not be mighty in numbers, are certainly mighty in their efforts, in their skills, and quite frankly, their attitude, because their can-do attitude with Kara, Apollo, the entire crew, the resilience that they have, given the responsibility and just the sheer range of ongoing ongoing elections, special elections, drama, everything that you would associate with a national political party. They do an astonishing job with. He's going to be talking about his experiences in the Frontier Project. Now, it's interesting because by definition, as someone who hasn't been to Alaska, it sounds like from our initial conversation, there's a great deal of similarities in both the media landscape, the electoral landscape of a place like Wyoming, and then a place like Alaska. Is that true, or am I painting with too broad a brush?
No, I'm sure there's plenty of similarities between the large landmass of separated populace and primarily a red state as far as historically and where the representation lies, and big hunting, fishing communities and living off the land, large subsets of Native communities. We have a lot of Native communities that are very important to Alaska politics here. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine there's a lot, and I don't know much about Wyoming, but something they might also have in common with us is the fact that there's way too many federally managed lands in Alaska. If you look at Southeast Alaska, over 90% of the islands in Southeast Alaska are federally managed, which really hampers development.
It's interesting, by the way, we a unifying force of the libertarian philosophy / party is our opposition to institutional power. As I've gotten to know people from around the country, it's interesting which institutional power we're all fighting. Now, for you guys, is it BLM? Is that the bogeyman per se? And I say that with a smile.
I don't want to get in too much to the land management agencies here because I happen to work for one of them. So to keep from violating the Hatch Act, I won't get into details on local land management.
Fair enough. The of course, building a culture of winning.
Well, let's go back to Apollo because I do want to touch on
sure.
not only is it great that he's going to be teaching about field operations. The ground game is so important for a candidate, right? Mm-hmm. But Alaska is trying hard to be the next candidate for the Frontier Project and jump in on that great Frontier Project that he's doing, which works because we are the last frontier. That's one of the great brandings Alaska has done for itself. Mm-hmm. And we're looking forward to not only the advice he has on field operations, but to learn more about the Frontier Project so we can copy the success of Marshall Burt and get statewide elected representatives in an area that we have identified that most people recognize as prime territory for a libertarian rising.
Right. And to that point, when you talk about some of the geographics, it's not just the large expansive landmass, but it's the intensely local nature, and I say this carefully, by definition, the somewhat affordable nature of campaigning in that type of dynamic, as opposed to the multi-million-dollar campaigns that you have to run in a variety of places in the quote-unquote Northeast, in the Rust Belt cities like that, where you've got six figures being spent on a individual's state senate or state representative campaign, and tens of thousands of dollars even or more are being spent on a town council. Is it campaigning? And I get the logistics between regions, but within a region like that, is it affordable like Wyoming? Is it relatively low key, or is it like every place else morphing into a sort of big bucks environment?
Really depends on where you are. There are some, like the people running for mayor and school board in Anchorage right now are probably shelling out a lot of cash to get that done. I think the mayoral candidates in Anchorage are up in the $300,000 and $400,000 for what they've raised so far to get mayor there. Here in Ketchikan, not so much. I could probably spend under $10,000 easy for an assembly seat. Not necessarily just to win it, but to run a good campaign.
Right, to be competitive.
For an assembly seat. I only spent maybe $1,000 on my school board run in order to win that one. Because in these small towns, it's more about who you are and who you know. And I told, when I was on Spike Show, I talked about I didn't win because of my newspaper ads, and I didn't win because of necessarily all the things I said during the interviews with the radio stations or the Chamber of Commerce forums. I won because my community knew me as a VFW commander. They knew me as a guy who volunteered to coach baseball. They knew me as a volunteer at the swim team, different things like that. That's what won the local race for me. And now I have a chance to show people what it's like to have a libertarian elected. And so far, so good. They haven't run me out of town yet.
And ultimately, that's the universal, isn't it, though? We talked about relationship with the media, relationship with the folks that you share a community with.
Mm-hmm.
And having a track record, being known to people, being involved, doing the job before you get elected to the job is very often the most important aspect. You're not, someone like yourself, you've had a career of public service. You're not waiting for the title to dive right in. An individual like yourself dives in and then sees the title really just as a way of perhaps getting more resources or being more connected to other individuals who are doing the work. That's will always be, I believe, the most important facet, the most important component of a successful candidacy, whether it be school board, water board, town boards, town councils, United States Senate, and everything in between. That connection to the community.
The title just adds official responsibility to what you're already trying to do.
Right. And perhaps a lot more accountability.
That's the hope.
that is the hope. So we get into the I would imagine. Well, it's interesting. I've gotten to know Spike a little bit because he spent some time out here in New England on the campaign trail. I doubt he would ever consider himself the keynote speaker. Of course, as our vice presidential candidate and someone who really brought, number one, a workman-like approach to the job. When he was in Rhode Island, every time he was in Rhode Island, we were blessed to get him a couple of times. He was never the type to want to take a day off. Literally, if he could have spent his entire day, meeting the public, not just libertarians, but, really getting him out in the field. And we were fortunate enough that we were able to engage with him with local activists who aren't even remotely libertarian. And they all walked away with this, this real sense of presence and this a real different look at libertarians because of his ability to embrace local issues, but also see them through the prism of the national challenges. He brings that culture of winning to the local community, to a state like Alaska. It's infectious, isn't it? Every time you work with him, you walk away on fire. That's been my perspective. What are you hoping he brings to Alaska?
Yeah, Spike's such an excellent representative of libertarianism and growing as one of the top representatives of the party for sure. Love how well he does on his repeat performances on Kennedy now. And that's how you get invited back on those shows, right? He always has a great opinion. He's never offering platitudes, and he makes for entertaining TV. But what we're hoping out of Spike is not only to draw in the many people in Wasilla that came out to see Joe. I think they're going to come out to see Spike as well, in addition for this training. But he's got so much expertise. I mean, all the states that he campaigned across, all the people he talked to, all the groups he brought in, all the people he helped unify to our message, that's so important moving forward. And sharing that experience and sharing that knowledge with all of our would-be candidates here in Alaska are going to be fantastic. And we're only half joking in the conversations we've had with him recently that we're trying to recruit him to officially move to Alaska. And so far we're beating out Florida. Florida is the other one competing for Spike to move out of his state. So hopefully we get him.
We hosted him at a fundraiser at a tiki bar in Rhode Island, and he took the place by storm. So, I got to tell you, we got some pretty good stuff happening up here. So I think we might, if the competition's open, we might throw our hat in the ring on that one. Anywhere he goes. And it was funny. We went one night from a fundraiser at a tiki bar to the next night. We were literally in the center of government in downtown Providence, Rhode Island, at a war memorial, which he took and every time I've seen him, it's he's got his core stump speech, but that's just a starting point. And every time he makes it local, every single time he just he adds that local fire to the message, so that we're not hearing, like you said, you just don't hear platitudes from him. You hear substance, you hear thought, and you hear action. And that's the kind of person that we need, not only at the front and center of the gold rush, but literally at every state organization. I mean, the hope is that we can clone him somehow. Don't know if we can do that quickly enough, but he is an astonishing presence. Now, you had mentioned that, folks could key into this. This is going to be available in person. Will this be broadcast as well?
Yes. So we're doing this. The only two, other than those of us who actually are part of the Alaska LP, that are going to be in person are Spike and Apollo. They're actually flying out to present. The rest of them are going to be presenting via Zoom. So this is going to be virtually offered. We already have a number of people, including one or two affiliates, that have signed on for the virtual presentation and are going to be holding their own trainings by registering and just gathering all their people together to do it virtually. So that's what I want to encourage, not only people outside of Alaska or who are geographically challenged and just can't make it to Wasilla, jump on the virtual portion of it and still get the training. And if your state or local affiliate needs this training, like I mentioned earlier, all you have to do is switch out that 9 o'clock slot with your local reporting requirements, and you've got a full start to finish training for all of your candidates and staff on April 17th. And when it's done, we're going to take the recording, we're going to send it to LNC and have them share it out to everybody. We want this resource to be widespread for the LP.
It's excellent. And literally what you're taking, this is like an all-star game. This is a chance to go to the Pro Bowl, virtually. And yet the message each one of these individuals carries is so powerful that it gives you opportunities to just share with the folks that you're sitting across the table from, whether it be in Providence, Rhode Island, or Wasilla, or Bangor, Maine, or anywhere else. It's an astonishing. Who actually did the organization for this, by the way? I gotta whose brainchild was this? Because this is brilliant.
Well, it was a couple of different board members kind of came together with it, but then once they decided, yeah, we should hold a training, I jumped in and just started messaging and texting people, and then came back to the board with that slate of people and said, this is who I think it should be. And I was just thrilled that all of them jumped on. I mean, these advocates for liberty on this list here are just amazing people who never stop working and never say no when it's time to support other libertarians or other candidates. And it's amazing that we've got these same people all in one slate.
Excellent. So let's engage in a little shameless self-promotion here. Give us the names, the dates, the times, how people can sign up. If folks are going to be watching it as a group, how they can sign up. Give us the landscape, if you will, please.
All right, so it is April 17th, which is a Saturday, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. in Wasilla, Alaska. We are operating inside of Everett's Bar, which is at Matsu Resort. We wanted to do it in Wasilla because of the great turnout Joe Jorgensen had. So at Everett's Bar in Wasilla on the 17th, you can sign up in person. Is $65, and that includes your catered lunch. We have the lunch catered. It's going to be an awesome menu we're putting out soon by Ancient Knowledge Ferments, which is a local libertarian-owned business that is going to be catering our event. So we're excited about that. And then if you want to jump on virtually, it's $25 for virtual registration for an individual to watch or to participate, in the training. And if you want to do a group thing for your affiliate or for just a group of people, then you can email me at communications@alaskalp.org and I can help set that up.
Excellent. So there's plenty of time yet, in a sense, although it's coming right around the clock. So folks need to reach out now in the next week or so, I would imagine, just to make it not a logistical nightmare for the folks in Alaska. But the time really is now to jump on this. And it's April 17th, again, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now, is that Alaska time?
That is Alaska time. And if you're coming in person, make sure you come the day prior, because at 6 p.m. on the 16th, we have our evening social with Spike and Apollo and everybody else who showed up there at Everett's Bar, and we're going to have a good time.
Wow. That sounds, back here in Rhode Island, one of the old-timey words is you have a time, and that's a political event. And it carries with it all the political boss implications that you would think of from a place like Rhode Island. But it sounds like it's going to be quite the time. Well, congratulations on this. It's a phenomenal effort, and the execution of this is just it's outstanding. I look forward to it. I'll be signing up for it. It's such a challenge to get these talents together because, when you look at someone like Caitlin, for example, just how many different campaigns, how many directions she's being dragged into, a remarkable spirit and a remarkable talent. But at the same time, it's, the bringing this sort of jigsaw puzzle of talents and people together. There's a slight element of luck in this, in the sense that it's so hard sometimes to make the pieces fit. So this isn't something that is easily reproducible. The technology is in place. That's great. Great hosts who've been working on this for quite a while. But again, that ability, sort of that all-star concert lineup, if you will, it's not going to happen
individually, but getting them all together, you're right. This was like a 6-month effort. So
right.
It would be tough to do.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. Have you got a message out that the folks from Alaska want to send to affiliates everywhere? Have you got a message you'd like to leave with tonight?
Now, just join us on the 17th, or reach out to us so it can become your own. We didn't do this just for us. All this planning, all this work went in so that everybody could benefit from it. So we hope you do.
Paul Robbins Jr., he is the communications guru, the head honcho, if you will, of communications for the Alaska Libertarian Party. Their event is coming up. There'll be a social on Friday, April 16th at 6 p.m. Alaska time. And then the following day, there will be an 8-hour marathon, if you will, of everything that you need to know in order to run and or campaign for elected office as a libertarian, with an emphasis, on everything. I don't think they missed a turn here. So please sign up. Please support the Alaska Libertarian Party as they grow stronger, and use both the resources generated by this and hopefully a great turnout to fund and support efforts in America's last frontier, the final frontier, if you will. It's a wonderful opportunity for the libertarian movement. Clearly, the folks up there are great stewards, if you will, of the libertarian philosophy, the statement of principles. Help them help us grow stronger with an event like this. But at the same time, let's support their efforts in Alaska. Paul, thanks so very much for joining us tonight. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You've been listening to, a product of the Affiliate Support Committee, if you will, an hour spent focusing on affiliates. This, of course, is a production of the Affiliate Support Committee, as well as the Libertarian National Committee. Valerie Sarwak and Joe Bishop Henchman, chairman, respectively. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be on the air every Monday night. If you are with a state affiliate and you would like to join us on Monday nights, or if you are running for office and you would like to join us on Friday nights, just reach out to me. My name is Pat Ford. You can find me everywhere on Libertarian social media. The goal is to raise the bar and raise the support level for individual affiliates around the country, large and small. And of course, the goal, as always, is to promote our wonderful down-ballot candidates, libertarian movement nationally. Every time we do this, we all learn a little bit more about each other. We grow a common understanding as to what our individual stresses and challenges are. And at the same time, we get a greater understanding of what our commonalities are. I believe that folks like Paul taking the time to be involved in this make us all a stronger party. Ultimately will lead to, if you will, our philosophy reaching broader audiences and greater acceptance. Isn't that the goal? A big thanks, as always, to John Gapso on the big board tonight. John's a volunteer who comes in 2 nights a week after a full and rewarding day in employment. to volunteer his services so we can make this production work. My name is Pat Ford. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you Friday night on Candidates Corner. Good night.